Dear students, this is Veena, Assistant Professor in the Department of English, Institute of Aeronautical Engineering. Today, we are going to talk about the usage of idioms and phrases in English language communication. How is that these idioms and phrases are playing vital role in enhancement and betterment of your communication skills? Communication is a very important process in the way of making you look forward and develop that entity and expertise over the professional workspace. Now, how is that you're going to make your communication more special and different from others? How is that it is you're going to please others with the communication which you have, and what is that criteria which you're going to maintain for yourself to build up that accurate communication between you and among the peer group? And whether these idioms and phrases are very helpful to you in the way of making your communication more better and also effective. Today, let us try to understand the usage of idioms and phrases and the difference between the idioms and phrases, and how is that these are catering in the development and equipment of good vocabulary process in the way of developing your communication skills. Let us get started. Here, what are idioms? How are these idioms help in constituting the better and the accuracy and the command over the communication skill? Let us try to understand with proper definition and their usage in the way of your communication. Now, every language has its own unique collection of sayings and phrases. That is, every language is equipped with certain sayings that which will behold the eyes of the communicator. That is, to make us look unique among the group, you are going to use these sayings or you're going to use these phrases such that it looks appealing and also different from others in the way of communication. These expressions often contain meanings that may not be obvious by simply looking at the individual words contained therein. We all call these expressions as idioms. Idioms are not the words which have the same literal meaning. They possess that expressions to justify the moment of the feeling or the expression in the way of the communication. How is that you're going to modify your language or beautify your language in the way of creating that essence and accuracy with the usage of word? That is, idioms are not just the words or the phrases with some literal meaning, but they cater that meaning with accuracy, maybe tending a bit farther from the literal meaning which it originally constitute. Next, the usage of idioms in English language. How is that we are going to use these idioms in English language? Every language has its unique collection of saying and phrases, isn't it? And remember, it is very important in the way of expression, in the way of making our thought process understood to the other person. How is that? With the general communication, with the usage of the general terms in the way of our communication, how is that we are going to build that uniqueness among that peer group in the way of addressing the needs as well as pleasing that conversation between you and the other person. So, idioms will help in the way of projecting the expression of the communicator in a very positive note. An idiom is widely used saying or expression. It is a widely used saying or expression that contains a figurative meaning. Idiom expresses a figurative meaning. That is, we have figures of speech, similes, metaphors, apostrophes, all these things. That is a colorful meaning, a beautified meaning to that particular phrase. That is different from phrase's literal meaning. The literal meaning is different, but these idioms are the expressions which are beautified and used to possess or project that particular situation. They may be not matching the literal meaning, but trying to put forward that expression or the saying since some years which is applicable in the language. For example, if you say you're feeling under the weather, just look towards this sentence. If you say you're feeling under the weather, you don't literally mean that you're standing underneath the weather, underneath the rain, isn't it? The literal meaning of this word is standing under the rain, beneath the rain, or beneath that bad condition. Now listen, under the weather is an idiom that is universally understood to mean sick or ill. It means sick or ill. This is the idiom which we use to denote the express of sickness or illness. But here, when we look into its literal meaning, that means we are standing under the rain or under the weather. No, we are trying to add the gesture of expression of sickness under this idiom. So, this is the way, this is the accuracy the idioms create to put forward an expression or thought or a saying in the way of your communication. Here, the usage of idioms in English language. Now, idioms often summarize or reflect a commonly held cultural experience. Here, they often summarize or reflect a commonly held cultural experience. That is, since generation, there may be a cultural experience carried out in the way of a saying or an expression. So, these idioms carry those expressions or the sayings into the way of your communication to build that expression at that particular instance of time and situation. Even if that experience is now out of date or antiquated. Of course, that was a past experience on which this expression was noted. But still, we use it. Of course, it is outdated. But still, till date, we are using that idiom as the way of expressing at that situation which it demands. For instance, you might say that someone should bite the bullet. Look into this idiom. Bite the bullet when they need to do something undesirable. What does this mean? So when someone is not desirable to do something, we use this idiom. What is this idiom? Bite the bullet. That which is not desirable. Will anyone like to bite a bullet? No, that is a risky thing. So, when someone is not interested, not desirable to do some work, we are using this idiom. That is the expression which is carried through this idiom. The phrase's origin refers to the wounded soldiers literally biting down on bullet to avoid screaming during a wartime operation. Now, its origin has the fact. What is that? To wounded soldiers literally biting down on a bullet to avoid screaming. In the war field, the soldiers would bite the bullet to avoid the screaming of the pain. At that time of instance, it was framed, biting the bullet. That common occurrence from the past. This was the situation from where the phrase was originally started from. Resulted in a phrase we still use today. Still we use this idiom at the instance of not being expressing to desire to do something. These phrases are also unique to their language of origin. In other words, English idioms are different from Spanish and the French idioms. Now, we understood the usage of idioms. They are used in the way to project proper expressions and add those expressions of certainty which has been equipped or developed in the past in the notion of projecting a situation at that particular instant. Now, what is the purpose of idioms in writing? Idioms are a type of figurative speech that can be used to add dynamism and character. Now, what is the use of these idioms? What is that these idioms are catering to the language? They are adding that dynamism and also the character of expression to the language. Now, idioms express complex ideas in a simple way. Here we have a complex gesture, complex idea, but these idioms will express those complex ideas in a very simple way. Now, oftentimes idioms can help express a large or abstract idea in a way that is succinct and easy to understand. Sometimes it is very complex. We don't really understand what to do in that particular situation, how to express it to others. But these idioms at that moment will be able to help you in rendering that message of expression which you want to deliver it to other. So, such in a simple way, these idioms will help you in the way of communication process. For instance, for example, you could say that two things are impossible to compare to one another because they possess different traits or meanings. Or you could simply say that it is like comparing apples to oranges. Here, when there is a situation which you want to say that when two things are not comparable, and because what is the reason of not being comparable? Every individual have its own priority and his own characteristics. How will you compare one individual to other? At that instant of time, I can use this idiom. What is that? Comparing apples to oranges. When I say this idiom in the way of my communication, it is easily understood that two different individuals cannot be compared. Why? Here, for example, we are looking into the idiom apples, comparing apples to oranges. That means how can you compare an apple with orange? Apple has its own criteria, its own advantages, and oranges has its own criteria, own advantages. Now, comparing these two is completely insensible. In the same way, to render that kind of meaning in the process of my communication, I am using this idiom. Now, in this case, the use of an idiom helps to express the same idea in much simpler way, isn't it? Instead of I'm sitting and saying that please do not compare two different individuals. He is having his own personal trait. He is having his own personal trait in my conversation. Instead of all this, if I'm using this simple gesture of idiom, don't compare apples to oranges. Don't compare apples to oranges in the way of my communication in rendering the message that don't compare two different individuals. Isn't it? That looks beautiful and also looks positive, shows that positivity towards your expression. Next, add humor to your writing. What is that second important use which can happen through your idioms? They will add humor to your writings. Everywhere, it is not that you have to be very serious always in the way of your presentation, in the way of your speaking skill. Be polite, be brief. You can add the touch of humor in your communication. For that sake, you can also utilize these idioms to add that touch of humor in the way of expression while you are communicating or while you are representing or while you are speaking to someone. Idiomatic expressions can help Transform flat description with the help of funny turn of phrase. Instead of giving a flat description of the things, you can describe it in a very funny way with the use of those phrasal expressions of the idioms. For instance, for example, let us look into an example to understand this too. Rather than describing someone as being not very smart, you could say that he is not the sharpest tool in the shed or not the brightest star in the sky. Here, understand the difference between the common general sentence and the idiomatic expression. Here, to describe someone not being smart, you can just say that he is not the only one brightest star in this room, or he is not the sharpest tool in this shed. That means there are many other people. You are not saying that only he is the smartest one. If you directly say this, it looks very uncomfortable. If you could put forth in this idiomatic way, that shows that he is among that group of sharp tools in the shed. Isn't it? That has added that expression and the gesture to the language without creating the negative pose and creating that positivity in the way of your communication. Now, in addition to conveying that the subject in question is not intelligent, that inherent comparison of person's brain to a toolbox or a star is unexpected and humorous. Instead of we are directly with a negative note saying that he is not just the smart person here, we are using the gesture of using this idiomatic expression that he is not just the sharpest tool in the shed. We are creating a humor as well as the expression what we are trying to tell to that person at that particular instance. So, such beauty the idiomatic expressions create in the way of the conversations. Next, keep your reader stimulated. Keep your reader stimulated. That means they make your readers sit erect and active. They make your readers tend towards you in the way of listening to you. They create interest among the group, among the audience, and make them steady and active to listen to your speech. So, idioms create that expression of stimulation among the audience because there is the difference and the uniqueness when someone is using these idioms instead of the general sentences to render their message or speech or their presentation. By inserting an idiomatic phrase in your writing, you force the reader to shift from thinking literally to abstractly. That is, when you are trying to use an idiom in between your writing skills, you are not only making your reader the literal meaning of that, but also making that reader to think in a abstractive way, that which is different from the literal meaning. This can help the reader stay focused. What is that? Which is going to create there? It will help the reader to stay focused and excited, as they must activate a more conceptual part of their brain in order to comprehend idiom's meaning. If you are using the general words, the general sentences, maybe the reader is not so much interested. Maybe it will not develop that activeness or stimulate that person. If you are using a idiom there, it will surely make him to try to understand it. It will make him engage for at least for a second to at least jot down what is the meaning. Why is that this idiom is phrased here? Is it authentic in using it? So, like that, you have to be very, very careful and also use them sensibly in between your sentences. Now, by describing someone taking on a longer task than they may have been prepared for, biting off more than they can chew. Now, listen to it. We are trying to help you with an example. By describing someone taking on a larger task, that means someone who is with more task, who is intruded, who is made himself to put on to the larger task, we are using this idiom. What is the idiom? Biting off more than they can chew. Chewing is a general process. It is a general work what you do. But biting off more than chew is, that is, you are going to take up a longer task than what it is needed. At this instance, we are using that idiom to put forward the stress or the hard work of that particular person. Next, it establishes a point of view. The expression of the point of view, how it is created, will be suggested, will be referred through these idioms. Since idioms are often used to express commonly shared or universal ideas, that is, they can be the normal sayings that which have been enhanced through the past ages. So, they are going to put those expressions, they are going to share those universal ideas which are applicable to that instant of time. So, maybe they are very, very useful, and also maybe they will cater your need at that particular instance. There are often dozens of idioms that can apply to the same concept. For one concept, you can apply so many idioms. However, depending on which idiom you choose, you can convey an entirely different attitude. Depends on the each idiom, there is a different attitude. Now, how is that, and how is that you are going to accurately and make that idiom applicable to that particular situation and time is your mastery over the idiom. You must be able to use properly, rightly, in the right instance. You cannot use one idiom for the other. Before you use, you must be able to know, can I be able to use this idiom here or not? Such that it put forwards the right point of view of that particular situation and time. Then, establish a point of view. For example, there are many idioms that express the concept of death, isn't it? But if you were right that someone passed away, you are using an idiom to describe death in a graceful, delight way. Alternatively, you could say that a person kicked the bucket. I think you all have heard this idiom. Kick the bucket. Instead of saying that a man has passed away, we are using this idiom, kick the bucket. A much harsher and cruder way of describing the act of dying. Though both idioms ultimately mean the same thing, they convey completely different attitudes to death. Here, passed away and kicked the bucket. Maybe this is looking a bit rude, isn't it? So, we must be able to analyze the differentiation, how each idiom refers that situation. Is it rightly applicable or not? Can I be able to use this idiom at that particular instance? You must have notice over it. Evoke a specific region. It will help you in evoking the specific regions in the way of your communication process. Certain idioms are unique to different areas of the world. They are very unique and they are stuck to the different areas of the world. For instance, the dog won't hunt. The dog won't hunt is a common idiom in the southern United States. That means that something doesn't work or make sense. Next, on the other hand, if someone to refer to a mess or a debacle as a dog's dinner, they are likely British. In fiction writing, the strategic employment of specific idioms are often add a regional flavor. So, these idioms are added with the regional flavor to them. They are stuck to some particular regions. Whether we are trying to use it or not, they portray that essence of that particular region. Next, examples of idioms and their meaning. Let us see. First one, you can't judge a book by its cover. You can't judge a book by its cover. What is its meaning? Don't assume you know something based solely on its outward appearance. Seeing the outward appearance, please don't judge that person. Next, every cloud has a silver lining. Every cloud has a silver lining. Good things come as a result of bad things. This means that. Next, once in a blue moon. Once in a blue moon. Very rarely. Next, back to the drawing board. Back to the drawing board. Restart a process from the beginning. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. We will worry about that problem when it arises. This means that. Next, a penny saved is a penny earned. A penny saved is a penny earned. It's just as useful to save money as it to make money. See the meaning. All these are very, very commonly used idioms which you can use in the way of your communication process and make it look unique and also qualitative and also more better than others. Now, what are the tips for incorporating idioms into your writing? First tip, identify repetitive or boring descriptions. Try to identify those repetitive and boring descriptions in your writings and try to replace them with some idioms such that it creates the interest in the reader as well as the listener. Read through your work with an eye for language that feel dry to monotonous. Look for instances for replacing a rote description with an idiom. That is what is mentioned here. We are saying that don't repeat the words in the way of description. You can make use of idioms instead of repetition of the description. Next, be careful not to overuse. Be careful not to overuse. You can use the idioms, but you will not overuse. You will not confuse the readers with n number of idioms. See that accurately, properly in the right position you are using them. Don't make it clumsier with the overuse of the idioms. Next, avoid cliche. That means avoid any sort of disturbance that which create any sort of negative notion or any kind of bad impression towards your reader. Next, this is all about your idioms. They are very useful in the way of positioning the expressions and also describing the thoughts and ideas with the positivity and also making the sentence structure in a very good and qualitative manner. Now, what is the role of the phrases? What is the meaning of the phrase and how is these phrases are going to be replaced in the process of your sentence formation and help in the way of your communication? In English grammar, a phrase is a group of two or more words functioning as a meaningful unit. A phrase is a group of two or more words which will function as a one common unit. A phrase is commonly characterized as a grammatical unit. It is the most essential unit of your sentence. So, it is taken as the grammatical unit in the way of your language acquisition. A phrase is made up of a head or headword or a keyword which determines the grammatical nature of the unit and one or more optional modifiers. So, a phrase may have a grammatical unit with a keyword and a very optional modifier. Next, common type of phrases include. What are those common type of phrases included? One is noun phrases such as a good friend. A good friend, example. Next, verb phrases. Drives carefully. Drives carefully. What is the work here? Action is drives carefully. It is modifier. Next, adjective phrases. Very cold and dark. Very cold and dark. Adverb phrases. quite slowly. Quite slowly. Here it is not a complete sentence, but it has sense. A phrase is not a complete sentence, but has sense. That is the phrase. And prepositional phrase in first place, in second phrase, in third place. All these come under the prepositional phrases. Now let us understand the right pronunciation of phrase. That is phrase. Phrase. Etymology, it is derived from Greek. That means explain or tell. Adjective is phrasal. Phrasal. Next, examples and observations. Sentences can be divided into group of words that belong together. Here, we will try to divide the sentences with group of words which will fetch meaning for it. For instance, in the nice unicorn ate a delicious meal. The nice and the unicorn form one search group, and a delicious and a meal form another. What is this? Is this a phrase? The group of words is called a phrase. Isn't it? We are having so many words. But is it sensible? Is it right phrase? Now, let us look into the right form of phrases. Phrases are the words which have sense, but which are not complete. Now, let us try to understand different types of phrases such that we understand their relevance and the usage in the sentence formation and its structure. Types of phrases. Noun phrase. For example, buy a big bright green pleasure machine. Buy a big bright green pleasure machine. Here, see, machine. Here we are talking. Buy a big bright green pleasure machine. It is from Paul Simon. Okay, next, verb phrase. Your father may be going away from a little while. It is from Ellen Griswold in the movie Vacation. Adjective phrase. It is always the best policy to speak the truth, unless, of course, you are an exceptionally good liar. This is from Jerome K. Then, adverb phrase. Movements born in hatred very quickly take on the characteristics of the thing they oppose. Next come prepositional phrase. I could dance with you till the cows come home. On second thought, I would rather dance with the cows till you come home. This is from Max, 1933. Now here, try to understand how these are all taken and how these are all used and framed in the way of their sentence formation. I have taken specifically from some authors because you should know how you are going to use these phrases to make it look applicable and also authentic. Now, prepositional phrases differ from the other four types of phrases. Prepositional phrases will be different from the other. In that, a preposition cannot stand alone. Why they are different? Because preposition cannot stand alone. Verbs, adverbs, noun phrases, they all can stand alone. But prepositional phrases, they cannot stand alone. Although a preposition is still the head word in a prepositional phrase, it has to be accompanied by another element or prepositional complement if the phrase is to be complete. Most typically, the prepositional complement will be a noun phrase. Prepositional complement will be a noun phrase. As prepositions cannot stand alone, they will take or make use of the nouns, so they may be complemented as a noun phrase. An expanded definition of phrase could be a prototypical phrase is a group of words forming a unit and consisting of a head or nucleus. That means it has the soul, the nucleus, the keyword, which will make sense to that particular word phrasing, but it is not complete, together with other words or word groups clustering around it. Now, if the head of the phrase is a noun, we speak of a noun phrase. If the head of that phrase is an adjective, we call it as an adverbial, adjective phrase. If it is adverb, adverb phrase, like that. If the head is a verb, the phrase is a verb phrase. In the following sentence, now let us see phrases, nesting phrases and clauses. Now, what is the differences? How is that they are described? Phrases contrast with clauses. Clauses will have the subject and the object and they can stand alone. While phrases have sense but they cannot stand alone. Which they do, however, resemble. The main feature of a clause is that it has all the components of a potentially structured sentence, namely a verb, an object and the subject. A part of the sentence with just these components would be called as a clause rather than a phrase. A clause is independent, it has its own subject, it has its own object. But while phrase has only the words which will be having a key nucleus and will constitute the meaning but will not stand by its own. A phrase contains a verb without its subject, or it may itself the subject of the some verb. Here, Harford notes two ways that phrases can appear inside other phrases. We will generally find the two ways of phrases. One is conjoining smaller phrases by a conjunction. We are going to use the phrases which are added with the conjunctions, that which are called conjoining phrases. Then nesting, a smaller phrase inside a larger one. There is a larger phrase in which you will find one more smaller phrase, that is called nesting phrase. Now, complex structures. What are the complex structures in which these phrases are applicable? Noun phrases and prepositional phrases can particularly complex structure in written text with several layers of phrase embedding. That is, mostly the noun phrases and the prepositional phrases are mentioned particularly in the way of the sentence formation of complex structures. When you are in the process of adding the sentence in the way of complex structures, you will be using these noun phrases and the prepositional phrases. In fact, the complexity of phrases is a very striking measure for comparing the complexity of syntax. To compare the syntax, to build up that meaning, these are used and equipped in the complex sentences. The simple structures occur in conversation and the complexity increases through fiction and newspaper writing with academic writing, showing the greatest complexity of phrase structure as told by Douglas Bieber, Susan Concord and Geoffrey Leach. Here, I would like to conclude saying that try to practice the usage of the idioms in the way of your communication and also rightly understand what kind of phrases you are using in the sentence structures as the unit to build right, qualitative, accurate and applicable sentences for making your communication more better and effective. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.